welcome to my channel. Welcome back if you've been here before. My name is Kat. I moved from the UK to Perth, Western Australia about 2 years ago now with my fiance, and I make videos about emigrating, life in Perth, and just general life events, life vlogs, travelling. There's going to be some wedding content coming up because that is very relevant right now. We're getting married in about 3 months, and today we are going to be talking about where you should live in Perth. So I'm going to start with a big fat juicy disclaimer at the start of this. Obviously we have only lived here for 2 years. I've not lived in very many places around Perth. We've only been in 2 suburbs in the time that we've been here. We've explored around a little bit, but obviously I'm very aware that this is only going to be from my perspective. I've got a general overview of a lot of areas of Perth, and I'm going to talk you through the main kind of clusters of suburbs and the general vibe, where it's going to be really expensive, where it's potentially a bit cheaper, where the expats generally all live, where's the cool places. So hopefully it will give you a bit of a broad overview, especially if you've not got any clue. Exactly like we were when we first moved, we didn't really have a clue about Perth at all and the different areas. Hopefully this will be a good starting point for you, point you in the right direction. As I say, we are a childless couple in our late 20s, and we are currently renting, and as I say, we're new to Perth, so that's going to very much limit and point us down one particular route of types of places. I quite often get people with families reaching out to me asking where they should live. It's not an experience that I have. I can talk about where I see other families kind of gravitating towards, but in terms of schools, crime rates, things like that, I can't provide a full, comprehensive guide. Yeah, what we're looking for in a suburb might be very different to what you're looking for. We quite like to have cafes and restaurants and shops and things that we can go to on a weekend, whereas some people will value good schools, cheap housing, potentially quiet neighbourhoods and things instead. So everyone wants different things. So yeah, wherever you want to live is perfectly fine. I'm not dissing anyone and their suburbs, and I also acknowledge a certain level of privilege. Obviously I will be talking about the nicer, more expensive suburbs and mentioning that obviously they come with a price tag. However, all of that said, this is one of my most asked questions. I get quite a number of people in my inbox every single week asking me where they should live for their particular circumstances. So hopefully this, as a very broad overview, will be helpful and useful and informative. And also I've put some resources down in the description box. So I have put a Perth crime map and a bit of a school guide as well, which should hopefully be quite a useful resource for you, should those things be particularly important to you. Alrighty, let's dive in. So where is Perth? It is on the west coast of Australia. It's pretty much slap bang in the middle of the west coast, and it is very much a kind of coastal city, and you'll see quite a bit of urban sprawl, which is my buzzword of the year, I think, which is where it's growing and sprawling up and down the coast, basically because of the landscape and geography of Perth in particular and Western Australia and the areas around Perth. There's not really any mountains or rivers or anything geographical to kind of hem it in a lot of other cities. Apparently that's kind of what stops this urban sprawl, is that you'll have something around it that we can't build over that national park or whatever it is. However, with Perth, there's just a lot of space. So these neighbourhoods are growing and growing and growing and growing. I'm only going to be talking about a certain area, which you can see on this map here, which is the kind of main areas within, I would say, probably about 45 minutes of the city centre, north and south. So Perth is here. So Perth City is situated on the Swan River. The Swan River runs obviously laterally through up to the Perth Hills kind of area. And there is a amusing north and south divide and a bit of a kind of rivalry. I say that kind of tongue-in-cheek. which we will touch on a little bit later. So in the CBD, it is very much a business district. There's not a huge amount of residential areas in the Perth CBD. However, you do have the kind of inner city suburb areas. So you've got very imaginatively named, you've got North Perth, South Perth, West Perth and East Perth, which are all obviously right around Perth city centre. And they are generally characterised by quite a lot of, with the exception of North Perth actually, but East Perth and West Perth in particular are characterised by a lot of apartment buildings, kind of dense living. Benefits of these are that obviously you've got the proximity to the city, there is a free bus network that runs around these areas and around lots of other areas around Perth, which is called the Cat Bus, and that is just a free bus that runs around there, and it's a good area. We lived in East Perth when we first moved. I've got a couple of videos on that, and we found it really good for finding our bearings. It's a very central location. There's a good train station in Perth city centre, so kind of a 20-minute walk or a cycle or a scooter or whatever away, and it's a good base to then explore all of Perth. So we thought, right, living in the city when we first arrived was going to be a really good idea so that we could get our bearings. I'm just going to apologise now for the squinting that I'm doing. It's supposed to be a cloudy day and the sun just keeps coming through, so my apologies, I'm not glaring at you. There is also an area called Northbridge, which I suppose I should say that's actually closer to the city than North Perth, which is where a lot of the nightlife is. There is some apartments there. Generally in the areas, and this is obviously a thing which happens in a lot of cities, but there is a lot of homelessness and drug problems and crime that you need to be aware of, particularly in the city centre area, and East Perth and Northbridge are pretty well known for it, and with Northbridge being where a lot of the nightclubs and restaurants and bars and nightlife is, then there's obviously a lot of homelessness and drunkenness, antisocial behaviour and stuff to be aware of around there. So generally I don't know that I would necessarily recommend living in Northbridge, each their own though. And then north of that you have the kind of slightly inner/outer city suburbs, such as North Perth, Leederville, Highgate and Mount Lawley. So they're all quite cool, trendy areas. There's quite a few strips of coffee shops, bars, restaurants, cool shops, that sort of thing around. Generally you see a real mix of older couples and then also couples in their 20s, some families. It's kind of a mid-ish range price tags depending on the properties. There's quite a few heritage properties or slightly older Federation style homes in these areas, so they are quite beautiful, but you might not be getting quite as much for your money potentially as if you're slightly further out. So that's north of the city. To the west of the city you have the Golden Triangle. Now this is characterised by the areas. There is a kind of triangle that you can see on the map. So these are the properties that have the proximity to the ocean, the proximity to the city and the proximity to the river. So it is characterised by this triangle that you can see on the map. These are the kind of dream homes. There is an area called Peppermint Grove, which is right along the river. That's where some of the largest properties in the Perth kind of metropolitan area are. And then you've also got areas such as City Beach, Cottesloe, Scarborough to an extent, which are also very, large houses. They're right on the beachfront. Some of them have the most amazing views of the ocean. We have the sunsets over the ocean here, so they get beautiful sunset views. It's a gorgeous place to live. A dream, very much a dream location for us to live eventually if we find our millions. So yes, these are some of the most sought after areas. Also slightly further inland you have areas such as Claremont, Dalkeith, Subiaco. All have very good schools to my knowledge, low crime rates generally, and are wonderful places to live, but will have a very hefty price tag. As you move further east and go kind of further along the Swan River, you come to the eastern suburbs. So these are areas such as Maylands, Belmont, Midland, Bassendean, and eventually the Swan Valley. And as you get more east, and this is where the airport is, you get a little bit more industrial. There's obviously a lot more space, it's a bit less built up, so you've got industrial estates. It's generally quite a bit cheaper, it's further from the ocean. I feel like the closer to the ocean you get, obviously the more expensive it gets. They are kind of older suburbs. I feel like they're less fresh and shiny than the new suburbs, and they do have a bit of wear and tear and feel, so in some areas feel a bit unloved. There are some absolutely gorgeous areas, so Bassendean and Guildford are in the eastern side, and those are kind of exceptions to the rule here. So you have some of the most heritage beautiful buildings that you can find in the kind of Perth area in these suburbs, and they are very, very well manicured, beautiful areas, so they still have a bit of a higher price tag. But the areas such as Belmont, for example, are a little bit cheaper, and yeah, as you move further east towards Midland, they are becoming a fair bit cheaper, a lot more industrial. Midland does have a bit of a drug problem as well, I believe, and the crime rates around that area, I do believe, are a bit higher. However, as you move even further east, then you do get towards the Perth Hills. So these are the areas where it's the national park, or like near the national parks and national forests. Big houses, expensive properties, lots of land. This is where to go if you've got a horse, for example. And yeah, really, really beautiful place to live, but it is far away from the city, far away from the ocean. Not a huge amount of like nightlife, so probably a quieter place to maybe retire to. Then as you move your way further up, you have the area in the kind of City of Stirling council areas. So these are areas which I actually have on my kind of watch list. So you've got the likes of Osborne Park, Doubleview, Innaloo, all of these areas which seem to be very much growing. Osborne Park, I could kind of see a bit of, I don't think gentrification is the right word, but it's an industrial estate kind of area. It's where you've got a lot of the like warehouses and furniture companies and things like that. But they're just, I'm noticing a lot of small businesses, you know, those cool businesses, those kind of trailblazer businesses do seem to be settling in Osborne Park and setting up new breweries or whatever it is there. So I just feel like that's where all the cool kids are going. Word on the street is all of the kids of the Golden Triangle kind of people, so the people whose parents have houses in the Golden Triangle, so say City Beach or Cottesloe, those kids can't afford to buy houses in that area, but they've got used to the lifestyle and they generally have a bit of money. They might have been given money for a house deposit or whatever, and they want to be close to where their parents are, so they're all moving to Innaloo, Doubleview area. Doubleview's a bit more larger, better for families, and I see it's a bit more well developed, whereas Innaloo is again budding. It's near the new Carron-up shopping centre, so all of those areas are up and coming, and I'm seeing a lot of people kind of my age, so mid to late 20s and early 30s couples starting up, so first home buyers or maybe second home buyers and young families and things are buying in that sort of area. So that is one to kind of keep an eye out for, I think. And then north of that, there is a joke that it is kind of just like people call it Little Britain a lot. So it's the areas, Joondalup is very well known for being kind of expat central, and then all of the areas around it, and there is a lot of urban sprawl again going up from Joondalup. So you've got new developments such as Alkmaar, like right the way up to Yanchep. You've got Burns Beach, you've got the Ocean Keys kind of area, Mindari, all of those sorts of areas, which I think you can get quite a lot more for your money. There's obviously a reason why a lot of the expats are wanting to move there. So I think it's close to the ocean, you get a lot more space for your money. A lot of these are new, shiny, fresh, new build, like the whole neighbourhood is newly built, and within that they generally provide, you know, a supermarket and then all of your like service shops there. So there'll be a baker, there'll be a coffee shop and things. For me personally, I don't know that these neighbourhoods have the, suppose, character that a well-developed urban suburb has, if that makes sense. So I always really want there to be, you know, like a small coffee shop. They always tend to be in these like back alley places with low rent, blah 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 blah. When you get a coffee shop in a brand new shopping centre, for example, I just never feel like it's quite the same. However, they have heaps, like every block will have a park on it. There's so much green space, so good for kids. You're so close to the ocean. You might be maybe 40 minutes away from the city, but not all jobs in Perth are in the city, obviously. So it's something to bear in mind. There's good pubs around, definitely something to look into. And as I say, there's a reason that they're so popular. There is also another development which is popping up in 2025, which is again something to kind of keep your eye out for, which is the Ocean Reef redevelopment. So this development is set to be a real kind of hub. It's going to be a beautiful marina, I believe, please tell me if I'm wrong here, but I believe there's going to be a pool right by the ocean, which will be a first for Perth. I'm always saying that they need to have a pool like right by the ocean. I know there's one at Scarborough, but I mean like a Bondi kind of vibe. So yeah, I'm predicting that buying in this area could be a very good investment, unless the prices have already hiked up to reflect the development as it has been going through planning for a few years. I'm not sure. So yeah, there's just a little insider tip for you. And finally, we move to south of the river. So I did mention that there is this kind of north-south river divide. This is just a little bit of, I don't know how much it is tongue-in-cheek snobbery, that both of them, like, it's a mutual thing that people are like, oh no, I'd never go south the river, or oh no, north the river's stuck up, whatever. But yeah, it's an amusing little divide. To be honest, I'm going to talk very briefly about a few south of the river places, but I don't actually know, maybe this is me being entirely north of the river vibes, but I don't actually know a heap about the other developments. Hey guys, sorry, I had to move. The sun was firstly roasting me, and I feel like not good conditions for footage. So, where were we? North-South divide. So yeah, there's quite an amusing rivalry that goes on between it, and I don't know who's right. So we have south of the river, but also slightly north of the river, we have Fremantle. So this is the port city. It's very cool, very popular. I notice it's very popular with Europeans. Not so many British people that I know of live there, but very, very popular. Any like European that I speak to is like, oh my god, I love Fremantle. Reason for this is that it's very, very historical. All of the buildings have that kind of heritage look. It is beautiful. Every street you go down pretty much is amazing. The architecture is lovely. It's one of my favourite places in Perth, and I'm fortunate to spend a lot of time there, and I just absolutely love it. It's very much, I feel like, a kind of gentrified suburb, but also prices are pretty decent. You can definitely get some cheaper places around there. Because they're heritage buildings, obviously that is a certain kind of size and style of property, so that's something to bear in mind. Some people absolutely love it, some people want a bit more flexibility, a bigger yard, whatever it is. There's absolutely heaps of coffee shops. They actually have an area called the Cappuccino Strip, which is just basically full of coffee shops. There's the markets, which are lovely, loads and loads of restaurants, bars, a couple of like later night venues. I was going to call it a nightclub, but definitely not, but a place you could go dancing, and just a really good scene, quite edgy. It's just amazing. I would definitely recommend checking it out. It probably, I would say, is the place with the most personality in all of Perth. It's incredible. As you move further east, there's the areas along the river. So really, really beautiful areas. These out of southern suburbs, I would say these areas in Fremantle are my favourite. If I had to choose one to live in, it would probably be these ones along the river. So we have the likes of Melville, South Perth, Vic Park, so Victoria Park. I feel like Victoria Park has a very similar vibe to Innaloo. It's kind of when people leave the Golden Triangle, they're kind of, and just generally couples or people in their 20s going for their first house, young families, etc., are going for Victoria Park quite a lot. There's a very, very good strip in Vic Park which has a heap of amazing restaurants, a lot of Asian restaurants especially. There's quite good shops around, and yeah, it's pretty cool. South Perth has the most beautiful views over the city. It's gorgeous. I quite often go there for the South Perth foreshore markets that they do throughout the summer season, which is just amazing, beautiful views. Quite a lot of high-rise apartment blocks, naturally, to make the most of the views. So quite a similar vibe to East Perth and West Perth. A little bit further away, obviously, you've got to get over the river. There is actually a ferry that runs across the river, so a lot of people commute by ferry, which is just delightful. But some people say there are quite a few restaurants and bars and nightlife things to do in South Perth, but it's definitely not... it's not pumping. So if that's what you're wanting, maybe there's other places that would be better for you. So further south of that, to be honest, this is where my knowledge kind of peters out a little bit. So these are the areas which are, so some examples, got my trusty map here. Some examples are Willerton, Borragoon, Palmyra, I think that's how you say it, Leeming, Canning Vale, etc. So these areas are a lot more affordable, you get a lot more for your money. I feel like if you're the sort of person who values, you know, you get these like economical people who are very logical and they're like, well, I want the most amount of space for the smallest amount of money, and I want there to be really decent schools and it needs to be good distance to my work. All of those things, these are the areas for you. If you want that je ne sais quoi of a strip with cool cafes and hipster vibes and stuff like that, these are not necessarily the areas. There are, obviously, as there is in any neighbourhood and any suburb, there will be good coffee shops and restaurants and things like that, but you might just have to hunt a bit more for them, or they're less, you know, there's fewer of them. But yeah, to be honest, I'm not going to say too much more because I don't actually know that much more. So yeah, that is the overview from my perspective of what I know about the suburbs around Perth. I really, really hope that that was helpful. I apologise that this isn't like overly well researched necessarily. I have been planning to do this video for months and months. I've done some research, but I wanted it to be done rather than perfect. And I think this is probably a good starting point for yourselves. And as I move on to do maybe spotlight on different suburbs, then I can go into a bit more detail. I can give a couple of cafe recommendations in each one. Let me know what sort of thing you want and whether it's even interesting to do a kind of spotlight on style video. And it would be general areas, like I'm not going to do it in every single suburb, but you know, say the Golden Triangle, show you a couple of typical houses, the main like restaurant strips potentially, bit on house prices maybe. Let me know the sort of thing that you want and I can see if I can make it happen. Obviously that will take quite a bit of homework on my part, so please don't expect this to be ready like that. I obviously do this alongside a full-time job, so let me know the sort of thing that you want to see and I will make it happen, hopefully. And thank you so much for watching. I wish you all the best luck in the world with finding a suburb with the rest of your move, etc, etc. Thanks so much, take care, bye.